Right. So now we're going to dive into a lot of Mr. Kegley's expertise. And so I'll let you take it away here. And
Absolutely. Well, and so listen, the premise of my practice is really based around one thing. I like to educate, I like to inform. What you don't know can and will hurt your business. Period. End of sentence. Especially if you're a California business, by virtue of the fact that the laws are consistently and constantly changing and being updated. If you're behind the eight ball, you're going to find yourself in peril's way. And so my goal is to at least lay out some foundational aspects of things that are the biggest problems that we are seeing in California right now. Number one, not even close second, is violations of wage and hour law under the California Labor Code. So to start out, I just want to lay this out. I did this last year during our presentation, and I always like to start here because it really is a foundational building block. It's the minimum wage standard under California law. And listen, I understand that most of the folks who are on this call today are not down in the minimum wage range for what you're paying your employee, but it really does have an impact. The impact has a trickle-up effect. Every time the minimum wage goes up, the people who are earning $19, $20, $25 an hour, they're going to expect an increase commensurate with that bottom line minimum wage. Additionally, as I'll talk about in just a moment, it also impacts your exempt salaried employees and their compensation as well. But for 2024, the key numbers that you have to keep in mind are down in that box down at the bottom of your screen right now that basically lay out that the state of California requires a minimum wage of no less than $16 an hour, regardless of position. If you have employees who work within the city of Los Angeles, they have their own separate minimum wage. For those of you who are not in an incorporated city, so Santa Clarita, California, Burbank, Palmdale, Lancaster, Long Beach, Glendale, these are all incorporated cities within the county. They will apply either their own minimum wage or they will apply the state minimum wage. But those people who are in the unincorporated areas, down in Sylmar, the San Fernando Valley, most of the San Fernando Valley, I should say, and outskirts of Los Angeles County, if you're not in an incorporated city, you must apply the higher minimum wage standard, which for 2024, at least the first half, is $16.90 per hour. If you notice on the screen, I do have up here plus CPI. For those who don't know, that's the Consumer Price Index. That means that minimum wage will go up each and every year that our Consumer Price Index increases. I'd love to tell you that if Consumer Price Index drops and we deal with the negative CPI, that the minimum wage goes down, but I think we all know better than that. We're already projecting 2024, July 1st, we're going to see a new increase on the unincorporated Los Angeles County minimum wage. It's going to be between $17.50 and $17.60 an hour. So keep your eye on that ball, because even if you don't have people who are stationed in Los Angeles County, if they're traveling into the county for any purposes and they're doing work in their workday within unincorporated Los Angeles County, the LA County minimum wage may apply depending on your industry. So just be thoughtful on this because it will affect that. And as I mentioned, every time the minimum wage goes up, so does the minimum salary. California ties their minimum salary to the minimum wage, 2 times the state minimum wage, not the county of Los Angeles, not the city of LA or any city where you're located. It's tied to the state minimum wage. So for 2024, our minimum salary for an exempt employee is $66,560 a year. You pay even $1 less than that, I don't care if you're a CEO of the company, you are not going to qualify for the exemption standard under California law. So keep in mind that if you guys had salary exempt employees in 2023 and you have not already increased their salary as of January 1 of this year, this is the time to fix it. And then you retroactively bring them up to that higher salary for any period where you were deficient. Get it done early, because in the event of any dispute, you don't want to lose the exemption standards, because then you have to make sure all those employees are tracking their time. They're getting their meals and their rest periods. They get paid overtime as a non-exempt employee. So just be ahead of the game on this. The one other thing I want to flag on the minimum salary, for those of you who have employees outside of California, you may have remote employees who are stationed in Nevada or Delaware or anywhere else. The federal minimum wage standard currently is $35,568. This will be going up. We anticipate that it's going to go up on April 1st. The proposed rule was introduced in August of 2023 to increase the minimum annual salary to $55,000 and change per year. The Biden administration has indicated this is one of their primary concerns through the Department of Labor to get this pushed through. And right now, it looks like we are going to be at $55,000 nationwide as a minimum salary as of April 1. And then the one last thing I want to touch on this is don't forget that even if you meet that minimum salary, the employee's duties and responsibilities still have to meet one of the very narrow exemption standards under California law.
Now, Brian, I have a question on that. So with the state minimum wage, I know there's the mid-year adjustment. So does that happen at the state level too, or is that only the city and the county?
That's only the city and the county. The state minimum wage always changes as of January 1. The city and county, because they work on a fiscal year, they increase theirs on July 1.
Okay, so from a practice and policy perspective, when employers are evaluating giving raises, obviously January 1 is critical for them to make sure if they have exempt employees to get above this threshold, but they don't have to worry about making any adjustments, even if the city or the state makes some of those, or sorry, the city or the county make any other adjustments.
As long as they don't have employees who are regionally located within those areas that would qualify for the higher minimum wage, that's correct. Okay. But my advice, my best practice is employers should be thinking about these things at the end of December and at the end of June, making sure that they've got compliance with both standards, because remember, the benefit always goes to the presumption of the employee, not the business owner. So if the state comes back and says you should have been paying City of LA standard rather than the state standard, that is going to be your burden to prove why you weren't paying the city standard.
Okay, that makes sense.
A few other things, and I'll just briefly touch on these. It'll be in your package of information after the presentation. But if you have if you have fast food franchises, these are the McDonald's, the Jersey Mike's of the world, any place that has 60 plus locations nationwide and is a common brand, the state minimum wage on this goes up April 1 to $20 per hour. That is every minimum wage worker in fast food, regardless of what service they're providing, food service, janitorial, support, etc. You will need to make sure you're paying $20 minimum wage. Understand that the legislature in California is pushing all of us to a $20 minimum wage. Their goal is to get us there by 2026. This is the first step by increasing the fast food workers. Additionally, if you're in the healthcare industry, this one is weird. I'm going to be very honest with you. There is a new minimum wage standard, and it's going to range between $18 and $24 per hour, depending on the job title and responsibilities. However, I do have late breaking news as of last Thursday afternoon. The governor has delayed this implementation of the healthcare workers minimum wage until January 1. It was officially supposed to roll out in July of this year, but because they cannot get the regulations drafted fast enough, the governor has delayed implementation of this to January 1. But those of you in healthcare, keep an eye out, because this is going to be a major change and an upset to your initial structure. You will not be able to go by the statewide standards anymore. And then finally, the wage theft claims. This is basically, from the labor commissioner's standpoint, you can no longer force an employee to arbitrate a claim if they decide to bring it forward to the labor commissioner. The state says we have a public policy that the labor commissioner's office is there to protect employees. We, employers, cannot force these things into arbitration. So just be aware that we're going to see more claims as a result of that. And then finally, the big boy, and I think everybody's probably read about this and you're sick and tired of hearing about paid sick leave. But in case you've been under a rock the last 3 months, I just want to highlight that as of January 1, every employee in the state of California, whether you have one employee or whether you have 10,000 employees, is entitled to receive paid sick leave up to a maximum annual accrual of 40 hours per year. Prior to the implementation of SB 616, we only had to provide 3 days, 24 hours. Now we have to provide 40 hours or 5 days, whichever is greater. So for those of you who have an alternative work week schedule where you're working 4 10-hour shifts, that means those employees must be allowed to accrue 50 hours annually to take as paid sick leave. You are allowed to put a cap on accrual year over year if you choose to. that cap can be set at 80 hours. So basically 2 times the maximum annual increases. Keep in mind, though, if you intend to cap your sick leave accrual, it must be in your written policies. It must be in your handbook, or if you have a standalone policy, that's fine. The same for that soft cap on the annual year-over-year rollover of 80 hours. Make sure that you've updated your employee handbooks for 2024, folks. We have several other things we'll talk about today, but this is the big one. If your policy is out of compliance, you will be subject either to audit by one of the state agencies, or an employee, a disgruntled former employee who's upset with you after you've terminated them, can turn around and sue because you don't have compliant policies under the new regulations. For those of you who are in the city of Los Angeles, or if you have employees who work remotely within the city of Los Angeles, they have to be able to accrue at a rate to be capped at 48 hours per year. So just be thoughtful on that, because they have a higher standard, a higher accrual. And as I mentioned on the last slide, remember, the tie always goes to the employee. It doesn't go in the favor of the employer in these situations. Okay. And then the last point on this particular section that I want to touch on, we talked about this last year, but so many employers are getting this wrong still. We're starting to see the first trickle of lawsuits coming in on this. If you are posting an advertisement for a vacant position, doesn't matter if we're talking Indeed or Monster or ZipRecruiter, or if you put something out on LinkedIn trying to recruit new talent into your business, you must, as a matter of course, provide the wage range that you'll be providing for that particular position. This is applicable to all employers that have 15 or more employees anywhere, whether they're California-based, whether they're national, whether they're international. If you have 15 employees firm-wide, you will have to make sure you're posting the wage range on every advertisement. You also must maintain copies of every advertisement that you have put out there advertising for your business opportunity for a period of no less than 3 years. The Kegley rule says you've got to keep it for 4 years, because there are some creative plaintiffs' attorneys out there who are calling this activity unfair business practices. So keep those records for 4 years to show that you have actually complied with the law and that you're posting not just the job description, but the wage range for that position that you have. If you don't already have this as part of your equal employment opportunity statement in your employee handbook, you need to go back and change it now. Get it up to date, get it up to speed, republish your handbook, get an acknowledgement saying that every employee has received a copy of it so they understand that you are an equal employment opportunity employer and that you do not discriminate based upon pay data or based upon sex, gender, national origin, or citizenship.
Hey, Brian, when you wrap up this page here, there is a question that came in, but go ahead and finish this and then I'll
absolutely
the question.
For those larger employers who are on the call today, I just want to highlight for you one more thing: the pay transparency and data reporting elements of this. If you have 100 or more employees in the state of California, you're required to provide not just your EEO-1 statement that goes to the federal government, you're now required to provide a new statement to the state of California. 2023, they delayed it several times. The report wasn't due until September of last year, but this year we've been told there will be no extensions. You must have your report into the state no later than May 8th of 2024. This is not something that you can just have turnkey done by your payroll company or your outside bookkeeper. It is a very intensive process putting this report together. You have to divide your employees by sex and gender, race and ethnicity within 10 different job categories that are defined by the state, and then separate them out by 12 different pay bands that were updated for 2024. If you need assistance with this, reach out to counsel now, because it will take you about 60 days to get this report compiled and accurate.
Wow.